Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this another edition of Goliath Property Matters. In today's show, we're going to be talking about landlord licensing, also about the regulation of agency and the requirement for minimum qualifications and potentially licenses to practice. We're also talking about the new lockdown rules and how this specifically affects the property market with regards to agency practice, contractors, maintenance, and viewing of properties. We're also talking about the continuing boom of the property market throughout the month of September. Now, yes, we're in November, and yes, the signs are starting to show the market slowing down, but that doesn't take away from the fact that the market continues to be strong. We're also talking about the potential long-term effects of another lockdown, job losses, company closure, and of course the impact that that is going to have on the property market. And finally, we talk about champagne. It's coming up to the festive season, and I don't know about you, but generally the only time of year that I drink champagne is either at Christmas or at weddings. So it's coming up to Christmas time. No doubt we're going to have some champagne at some point, and here is a list of 11 bottles of champagne under the price of £25 that we think you're going to enjoy. So let's get on with the show. So in our first news story this week, we are talking about national licensing of landlords and also the introduction of regulation amongst agency, particularly minimum qualifications required to practice as an estate agent and potentially needing a license to practice as an estate agent as well. Now, first, let's address the landlord licensing. Now, I personally believe that this is a really good initiative. I think it's something that we need to introduce into the private rented sector on the basis that there are still numerous rogue landlords that are operating unsafely and unethically, and they're bringing the reputation of the industry down. And the reality is that the majority of landlords do practice being a landlord properly, which means that a licensing scheme is not something that they're going to be particularly worried about. My concern is if they are using this as a way to generate revenue, they're going to put substantial prices on these licenses. That is something I do not particularly agree with. Kind of similar to HMO licensing, they specifically target a group of investors who they think can afford to pay substantial fees for these licenses, when in fact that is not always the case. And I just really hope that landlord licensing doesn't go down that same path. With regards to agency, of course, I know that there are many countries around the world that already operate on the basis that a real estate agent, a property agent, needs to have a minimum qualification to be able to carry out certain activities, for example, market appraisals, viewings, whatever it might be, because they are expected to hit a minimum standard of practice. So bringing that into the UK, it's not really a case of if, it's more a case of when. Of course, at the moment with everything going on, that's likely to be delayed even further, but it's definitely a good move, in my opinion, to really improve the property industry as a whole in the United Kingdom. So yes, we are about to go into another lockdown. If you're watching this on the day of release, the chances are we have already gone into lockdown, which is of course this Thursday. I'm recording this on Wednesday, so it's tomorrow, and it is another full-scale lockdown. What's interesting about this lockdown, however, is that the property market doesn't seem to be getting closed down the same way that it was before. Now, there is guidance around viewings, around homeowners leaving the property rather than showing viewers around. Is it going to change the way that things have been done since the last lockdown? Probably not. I think people might be more vigilant of what the scenarios are with regards to safety, PPE, all that stuff. But I don't really think that the practices are going to change much. What is interesting, however, is that there have been a number of surveys, a number of questionnaires put out around buyers who are more nervous at the moment about going around people's houses and viewing, which means that naturally that is going to have an impact on the property market. That is going to slow it down. And this lockdown could potentially just be another nail in the coffin of the property market and its impending crash whenever that might be. Interestingly, contractors again are allowed to go around to properties subject to the correct PPE and COVID related practices. So the market's not really changing. Nothing has really going to be affected. So actually we're going to be able to see the market continue to move. Is it going to slow down though? I think it is, but time will tell. Now, in stark contrast, of course, this next story is all about the September numbers of property viewers, buyers, sales agreed, and they are at an all-time high. What's interesting, however, is the number of first-time buyers is starting to decrease month on month. And what actually, if you know you've been tuning into the Goliath Property Matters newsletter, you will know that first-time buyers really do underpin the property market. We rely on the first-time buyers to buy the properties that people are moving out of, hence the chain moving up the ladder. So what's interesting now is if the first-time buyers aren't buying, they're not able to get lending. That's starting to tighten up. The generation rent are starting to even be less likely to purchase property. That's going to start to have the knock-on effect. Already agents are starting to talk about the slowing down, preparing for what will come into the new year. Of course, once stamp duty holiday is removed and everything else. So it's only more signs that the property market is starting to slow, with the impact no doubt going to be felt quite hard next year. And really our next story continues on from that, in the sense that the fact that the impact of lockdown again is going to have those companies that maybe did struggle a little bit through the last lockdown but just got through by the skin of their teeth, in particular the hospitality sector and the entertainment sector. Well, actually this second lockdown, because that whole sector is being closed yet again, is this going to be too much for that sector to survive? What that's going to lead to are job losses. Job losses, of course, are going to lead to people not being able to purchase properties that they've maybe had sales on agreed on right now. It's going to stop the people that were thinking about moving next year from moving, because, of course, they're not going to have jobs in order to be able to pass the affordability test. And people are going to be slightly more nervous about committing to anything substantial with regards to monthly outgoings, in particular mortgages and the ongoing costs of property. Some people are going to be moving back in with parents at the younger generation. Those older generation may well not decide to purchase a larger property. They might downsize. All of these things are factors to consider with the property market. So all of this in the melting pot that is the current property sector is going to be a very interesting one to watch as the months go by. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we are talking about champagne. And what we're actually talking about in this article is the best champagne for under £25. Now, like I mentioned before, generally the only time I have champagne is at celebrations. The only celebrations that we really have champagne at are either Christmas or weddings. And at the moment, there are very few weddings happening. So clearly, the next time I'm likely to have a bottle of champagne is going to be in the at Christmas. I do remember when I was an agent back in the day, one of the things we used to get regularly at Christmas from contractors, from clients, landlords, investors, tenants, they always used to bring in bottles of booze. Now, I don't know whether that's because estate agents are associated with being alcoholics because of the stress that we're constantly under, or whether it's just a nice gesture at Christmas time as a bottle of booze. But a lot of the time, I got bottles of champagne. So I spent the first few months of the following new year having champagne, getting used to that champagne lifestyle, and then again we stopped until weddings and funerals. Well, the beauty now is that bottles can be purchased under £25. Good quality champagne can be purchased under £25, and in this article that's exactly what there are. 11 bottles of the best reviewed champagne under the price of £25. Hopefully you might find something useful in there, as I did. And that's us, another edition of Goliath Property Matters. Hopefully you are enjoying these as much as we enjoy delivering them. And that is another Goliath Property Matters newsletter stood and delivered. Now, if you're interested in being notified, you can sign up to the email newsletter and get this in written form. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and also hit the bell button to be notified when new videos are put out. You can also watch us on Instagram on the Insta stories if you follow Goliath Sourcing Academy on there. So that's it for another week. Thank you, everybody. Hopefully you are ready for lockdown as we start into another month of restrictions on our lives. Hopefully we come out the other side happy as Larry and ready to move forward into the Christmas period. So that's us from now. Thank you very much for tuning in. Until next time, happy sourcing.